So what precipitated the move to Utah, and when was that?
That was after we'd been there about about 6 years. Woody was in the bishopric.
Dad, Scott.
And that was a good life. We loved that. And but the studio work was not always definite. It was off and on. It's the way everybody had to live, and it was not good. So when Farron and Berlin asked us to come join them at the homestead, we were delighted.
Do you remember what year that was?
I don't remember that year. They'd made a big welfare film just by commuting, and a group of them.
For the church?
Yeah, for the church. And so then they decided to organize the film department.
So the homestead and the film department happened at about the same time? Was it always the plan to do both, or was
Yeah, do both. We'd do both in the summer and then the BYU in the winter. And the nice lady, I remembered her name the other day, who was on payroll, said, "Scott, these professors get paid in the summer, and I think you should too." So we got a double check in the summer. And she just took it upon herself to do that.
So where did you live when you first moved back to Utah?
We lived at Springdale.
You bought the Springdale home right when you moved from California. Do you remember what you paid for that home?
Yeah, that was about $8,000. And it's now so choice. I hate to think of what it is.
So that was at Provo Canyon.
At Provo Canyon.
A
A log home, and it was kind of rustic, and you couldn't tell how much you'd paid for that home. Was in a very kind of a little exclusive area, but you couldn't tell that was an $8,000 home like you could. So I thought it was kind of a good camouflage, but actually it was too far away to really be good.
Was it both of your ideas?
To live there? Yeah, I didn't anticipate what, the problems would be.
So while it was kind of halfway between the studio and Midway, it was just a little remote.
Yeah, it was.
Was it bigger than you were used to?
It was still pretty small, but about the same size as our California house.
And what are some of the work associated with that house? There was
a
lot of windows and wood.
Yes. And the outside, keeping the shrubs. But you younger kids kind of enjoyed, just playing out. You didn't. No, it was the boys and Lisa. Yeah, that's what it would have been.
So how soon after you moved to Utah, then it had been quite a gap since you'd had time. Were you trying to get your health back together those years, or?
Yes, yeah, but and I say that counseling did help. Swimming helped a lot.
So you swam at the homestead?
All the time I was at the homestead. I could get out of the pool, feel 50% better. So I knew that was a good thing to do. So
And walking.
And walking.
And Jack LaLanne. So you had another boy.
Another boy.
In January of 53. So you'd been in Utah a few years.
But we were still going back and forth, living in Midway in the summer and Provo in the winter. We did that for quite a few years. And that was all right.
So you had baby Doug, and then Anne was born about 2 years later in March of 55.
We were living in in Springdale, but we went up to the hospital.
In Heber.
You were born in Heber.
So Doug,
we liked them.
Doug, Ann, and Lisa were all born in Heber. So, were you pretty much thinking you were done after I was born?
Yeah. In fact, Woody and I were talking the other day, and I thought when we married that was number one on the agenda. And most people did.
To have children.
You married to have children. And nothing, according to some of the church leaders, should take precedence over that. And that's what we did.
Did both you and Dad feel the same?
Yeah. Everyone did.
So it was multiply and replenish.
Yeah. Lots of encouragement to no honeymoon after you're married. You just.
So why don't you just go through the children and just tell any specific memories you have about. Begin with Wendy.
Wendy, I remember in Westchester, she attended kindergarten. Space was so precious in kindergarten, so Scott stayed overnight in line to get her into kindergarten. And that was very close to home. It was good to just walk back and forth. But she was quite strong-willed and wanted her way. And I remember spankings, and I thought, no, that's not good. So I asked this psychologist that I was going to what to do, and he sent me home with this timeout procedure, which has just been great, really. And then Bonnie was, she was a little easier. She didn't have the mindset, but she climbed. There was not a cupboard or a dresser that she could not climb. And she would climb. And she wore her shoes out, 2 to 1. You kids could keep your shoes, hers would just be to shreds.
I remember Dad saying she was like a fly. She could walk upside down.
Yeah. And Doug was, it's Tom. Tom was easier to manage. Tom and Doug were easier to manage discipline-wise than the 2 girls, which is strange. They were not as hard to control.
Maybe because they were so revered.
I don't know. You mean it wasn't made known, it was made quite known?
More by Dad than by you, but yeah. So, they were always so active and entertained themselves and not critical.
No. And one day, Doug was down in the river back of our place, and it was a long time coming home, and Tom kept looking out the window, and he finally said, nobody ever had a better little brother than I do. So the age difference, they didn't play too much together at that time, but they did have a respect for one another.
And they were both really athletic.
Yes. Oh, yes. Both got a lot of encouragement on that athleticism.
But they did seem to have abilities that way. So I'm sure you have great memories of watching them?
Oh yeah, games.
And what were Wendy and Bonnie's activities that you...
There was no baseball, no...
For girls?
Mm-mm. Mm-mm.
You sewed the girls' clothes?
I sewed all the girls' clothes and most of the boys' shirts and my clothes.
Not really wanting to sew?
No, it was not my thing. I was not what you'd call cut out to be a seamstress. I did it under duress, just for save a little money.
So it was, again, trying to get a little nicer product for less money.
Yes, for less money was the idea. And then with you, Anne, I guess my most vivid memory of you would be I was going up for my walk up the hill, and I turned around, and you were down the hill a ways, but you knew you weren't supposed to come, but you ducked your head, thinking that if you couldn't see me, I couldn't see you. And so you continued to walk quite a ways.
Think of all the exercise I got following you to pools.
That's right.
How old was Anne at that time?
Oh, she was probably about 3 or 4.
I'd follow you to the homestead pool
Uh-huh.
and
Yeah.
watch you swim with your cap on.
Cat. Oh,
And
gosh.
I'd splash at the other end, and then one day I thought, I bet I could do that, and I just started to swim. So the swim team was a big
Oh.
part of Doug
Anne and Lisa's life. Because they were good swimmers at the homestead. And then they came down here and were spotted and asked to be on swim teams. So...
Tell the truth, I was asked, and they asked if I had any siblings,
Oh.
and then they were so much happier with the siblings. Not bitter.
Oh.
So the homestead, did it prove to be what you had thought it would be when you came to Utah, or was it disappointing economically? Or?
Oh, we didn't really know what to expect, I think.
Do you have fond memories of those years, or was it?
Yeah, I do, generally. We had a lot of friends come from other places to see us at the homestead. So that was...
It must have been
kind of fun.
quite a prestigious thing.
It was. It was to be associated with it. It was quite a prestigious...
And what were the jobs that you and Dad did at the homestead?
I waited on tables and I helped in the salads for a while, and Dad did the horses and then the entertainment, and made a nice contribution with the entertainment.
So you were at the homestead from like 1950 until the mid 60s,
Uh-huh. Yeah.
and then
You kids all had different jobs at the homestead or play.
ponies, pools,
Yeah.
and good Sunday dinners. Do you remember any of the menus at the homestead?
Just the chicken dinner for $3.50.
That was the most
Oh yes. it
fried
was.
chicken.
Fried chicken with they had watercress that Farron got out of the ditches, and they had hors d'oeuvres like beans, kind of
Kidney beans. and
kidney
a
beans were good, and something else that you got
cottage cheese and
for
chives.
appetizers.
And Jello on a lettuce leaf.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
So it was a lot of work.
It was a lot of work. And others were more devoted to they weren't devoted to the church. They did not try to work in church activity with the homestead. They thought, we'll do this, we'll do a good job, and the other can wait. And our family didn't feel that way.
So some conflicts with trying to
budget time, and they could have all seen that one family took a day off each month to go to church, but they didn't want to.
So did they make allowances for you all?
Yeah, because we were in a position where we could do it.
Did you like Midway?
Yes, I liked Midway.
You were happy to be back in Utah?
I was very, very happy to be back in Utah. But my big fear, when I knew we were moving to Utah, I'd been brainwashed in these California wards who said, in essence, all Utah Mormons are just riding on somebody else's faith. They're not really committed people. So when we came back here, I totally redoubled my efforts on reading, and I did not want to let that happen to our family. And I was sure that was the case. So we did a lot of reading in Midway, if you recall.
I recall slant boards.
And reading.
And slant boards relieved your back. They were homemade, kind of padded boards. Sunshine.
Yes.
Slant boards in the sun.
And swimming.
And Bible stories.
Yeah.
Tell us about your philosophy on the Bible stories and reading to us. And
well, my one thing was that I would read the stories, and then I would try to get little things in teaching moments, along with what I did regularly. And so if it was wheat we were working with, we would be talking about Joseph, how he saved all that wheat, or if it was something else, I would relate it to something in the scriptures and sandwich in a few more.
what was your philosophy on discipline?
Well, since that I knew that spanking was not good, so I did it more by, taking away privileges.
Charts, and black marks,
Yeah.
angels in heaven taking notes.
Well, the three degrees of glory. Oh my gosh, yes. Where is this going to take you?
So Lisa was born in 1958 in August, and she was supposed to have been
a boy, George. We were going to name this baby George. And here is Lisa. And so we I adapt easily. And it didn't matter to me.
And she was a sweet, easy baby.
She was very easy.
What were your babies like?
Not easy. Not really easy. Not like some babies that I saw. They were not as easy.
Did you breastfeed or?
I did. I tried each time. I just did not. Even in Midway, this Dr. Dan, the old doctor, advised women to make an alfalfa tea if they wanted to. When there were no bottles, they had to breastfeed. So they told me that, and I tried it, and it did work. If you just drink enough alfalfa tea in the garden, you could just feel that it produced milk.
And then for baby food, you just made your own?
Yeah, mostly some cans, and some paddling.
And diapers were?
Oh, I had to buy the flannel and get the thing on the machine to make hems and hem all these diapers, and then fold and wash them. Never.
So everything
What
was
was
the
it?
hard way in ironing. And
Yes, still ironing. And it was, we were in Provo, for the winter at least, when wash and wear came out. It was like a miracle. Therefore, you have the proof of every school year being dressed in a fabric of wash and wear made by me.
tarpoon fabric.
Tarpoon.
And they only made plaids.
They only made the only way you could do that is with plaid material. You couldn't do it with a flowered. So yours were various plaids. But as I say, at least Shirley Condi thought your clothes were outstanding. So even though she didn't look close enough to see that the buttonholes weren't all perfectly finished.
So by and large, as babies, we weren't easy.
Mm-hmm.
And then toddlers and
Yeah. The homestead occupied the family quite well for summers. The kids could just hang out
that
wherever.
had its advantages.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And Wendy and Bonnie worked at the
Yeah,
homestead.
they worked.
Earned a lot of money for
Uh-huh.
college. And
Tom worked. Yeah.
Doug would get sunstroke every.
Oh, you get high headaches.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there were allergies.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And we lived next door to the Wallengrens for a while.
Yes. Yes. That was fun.
So, who were your friends in those years?
Ken and Carmen and Ormondale, and that's about all in Midway. We didn't have a lot of time for social activities. We'd just barely slip away for little league games and stuff. Then we'd have to be back.
And
So,
winters at the cabin,
uh-huh.
which was heated with a coal.
Old coal furnace.
And life at the cabin wasn't easy.
Oh no, it was not easy. The heating was a problem, and of course the summers were kind of pleasant. It was quite cool there. But
What was having teenagers like for you?
oh, I enjoyed that. I enjoyed all your
The friends?
activities, and yeah.
Now,
Yeah,
it was
that was good.
1963 that we moved from the canyon to 11 East, 2050 North.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
And how was that for you?
That was very good because there was not all the commuting, and I felt like I had more close friends in the ward, even though I went to the same ward, and you were all involved in many activities.
So you still have some of those friends.
I do, a lot of those friends.
You mentioned Shirley and
Condi,
Dolan Condi.
Gloria and Ralph Cooney,
Cooney,
and Norma Ray's gone, but she would have been
the Arringtons.
Arrington's. So,
And
yeah.
that's where you got to know Woody
Ruth
and Ruth Evans.
Woody, yes. We were all in the same study group.
And
with
those
them.
met on Sunday evenings.
Every other Sunday evening.
And they're still going strong.
They are. This particular group is. I understand they're not encouraged to do the separate groups, that if you have a get-together, it should be an open group, and I agree.
It was a little exclusive
Yeah.
of some people.
Yeah.
Did you have anyone that you turned to for advice, or?
Oh, way back in California, somehow this woman didn't even know me. She must have sensed what I needed. She supplied it. Phyllis Gilbert. She would talk on the phone till you kids would get so tired of it. But it was very wise of her to pick up on.
That was in L.A.
Mm-hmm.
And you were close to Orma.
Oh yes, Orma and I, yes, had a lot in common. Yeah, we were both battling the hierarchy.
So, Mom, how did you feel as your children started to leave the nest and get married? And
Well, I was happy, you know. I still had enough left, and I.
because you sort of had two families.
Yes, yeah.
So Wendy met Noel. Kansas.
No, yeah, and that we were very impressed with him. And his mother would come up, and we'd get acquainted.
As I recall, you felt a fair amount of pressure to put on a nice wedding for this married
Yes,
family.
yes, and I think it was a nice
very
wedding.
nice. So,
Except that we oh no, it was when Anne, when you became engaged, and we said, and Anne, where do you want to have your reception? And she said, in the backyard. And both Woody and I said, in the backyard! Because it wasn't up to snuff, we just kind of moved there.
and then I didn't lift a finger.
Well, and then you couldn't sleep through all the first thing in the morning. The water was going. So by the time
It was very nice.
it was very nice, natural trees, and yeah, that was a good place to have it.
So Tom finally,
Finally found someone who could bamboozle him into marriage. A lot of them couldn't.
because he was
escaped.
older.
He escaped.
So Dad was older when he married you. There was quite an age difference, and Tom repeated that pretty
Yes.
closely.
He did.
26 or 7. And
Yeah.
he married Linda Pinniger.
And then Doug. I saw Doug drive out the driveway the first time he got his driver's license, and he was going over to see Val. He had a special look in his eye. I sort of knew. That was a nice family.
And they met at Provo High, and Burl and I met at Provo High.
Yeah.
And then tell us a little bit. Well, we'll talk about Lisa. We had by then moved to Orem, and one of the priests blessing the sacrament, Dad said he looks like one of Robin Hood's merry men with those eyebrows, and that was John Davis.
And
who she later married.
And Betty Jo could see us down here and saw us in church, and she said, why can't my boys marry someone like that, Lisa, you know? So after going through Skip Dunn and a few people, she did.
And Dad encouraged me when the Laws moved to Provo. He said, why don't you hook up with one of those Law boys? Because with my speed and Vernon Law's size, he was
always thinking athletics, wasn't he?
And we did.
I think we've got the speed, Scott.
We did produce some good athletes. So what advice do you have for married couples, Mom?
Oh, well, I don't believe in arguing because I don't think it gets you anyplace. If I get to a point where it's just an impasse, then I'm just silent. Then I let it rest. Because there's so many, if you keep saying these unkind things, it's not good. You've got to get over that. It's best not to say them in the first place.
So why didn't I take after you? Now, it was in about 72 or 3 that the family moved to Orem. But in the meantime, tell us about your work.
Oh, well, you know, with a BYU salary, there are such limitations, true limitations. And that's why when I knew we were working for BYU, I thought, I don't want to be beholden to that BYU
Hierarchy?
yeah, and trying to live and retire on a BYU salary. And that's when I figured that with this insurance policy that I had bought at age 18, that I could cash that out, because I was always more interested in the money end of things than Scott was. And so we did that. We cashed it out. I never ever could have gotten $2,000 any other way.
And you bought your first
rental.
rental.
Yeah. And they've been kind of a millstone around our necks.
Do you have any idea how many you bought over the years?
No, maybe we have 20 some now, and others that we've sold.
And you also began working for BYU yourself.
I began to work for BYU, and they hired me as, what would it be, over the ladies'
co-ed
shop.
department?
Yeah.
The
Managed
manager?
the college. So the man that managed the men's department made $600 a month, and I made $200 a month. And his department was not as
well
run as mine. But that's just, it was just kind of cut and dried. At that point, you didn't even think of it.
Around those years, you had beautiful long red hair.
Uh-huh.
And then one day, the hair came off.
Yeah.
To quite short, and you never did grow it again.
Back. And I came to dinner with rollers in my hair. You were the only one that knew what had happened. And you figured it out.
Tell us about some of the meals that you used to make.
Oh, a dessert was always part of a meal. You didn't finish until you had some kind of a dessert. But I had stuffed peppers.
Meatloaf?
Meatloaf, yeah, always meatloaf. And curry and rice. That was always an easy, good one. I still like that. I should do it more.
Spaghetti?
Spaghetti and chili. I bought apples like I do now, only they weren't as good. And then I would do a tapioca pudding or a rice pudding or something
A
light.
roast on Sunday.
Always a roast on Sunday, because that was so easy. And then at that time, Scott was in a bishop on campus, and we'd have all his stellar ones come by and get out the cheese, and they'd call it the house of cheese, because we could always make cheese sandwiches or
bricks of cheese.
Bricks of cheese. Yeah.
So, your health seemed to improve some.
Yes, like I could work and go to school, and
you enjoyed that Pleasant View ward. And
I did. I liked that ward.
And then tell us how your business grew out of.
Well, I was at the homestead, and I could see that these little triangle kind of organdy ties that would tie back in a triangle.
And scarves.
That were selling well at the homestead, so I had some made up, and they sold very well.
You could see it at the homestead or at the bookstore?
Homestead.
Oh.
That's when I left the bookstore. Because I practiced on the homestead. And I could see that it could be done. And scarves happened to be absolutely necessary. Everyone had a scarf. I went to Salt Lake ZCMI, and they had, what are they, Ann? Just the little bits of fabric.
Handkerchiefs?
No, not
samples?
Samples, kind of fabric from New York. They're mill ends. And I would buy this hot-looking fabric and have these scarves made. And I said, "Now, Learta, I'm too afraid to show them to anybody." She says, "I will take them." Nice of her. She took them to the stores in downtown Provo, and they said, "Oh, wrote little notes, hot goods, and great," and took orders. So
that would have been Castleton's and Hoover's.
Yes, yeah.
So you just accidentally got into this. And tell us the name of the business.
Named the name of the business, Lisa Originals. And because Scott had to go back to New York on a film, I thought I will go back and get some contacts for fabric so I can order yardage. And before that, Scott had kind of resented my doing the business. But when we were back there, he'd go with me to these Jewish salesmen. And they had so much in common and carried on that he thought, that's all right, let her go ahead and do it.
One of the fun times around that time was our trip to Europe.
Oh, yes. But that was because we sold the homestead. And Daddy wanted to make it very clear. This was not Lisa Original's money. His wife was not paying for this trip. He was paying for this trip. So we made that trip and met Bonnie and Tom.
That was in about 1970, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Right around. And everyone but Wendy was there. One of the hard things was Wendy's tumor.
Yes, we were home and got word about this tumor, and Noel was in
getting an MBA.
Yeah.
The U.
And so, who went back?
Dad.
With Scott? Yes, he went back.
To the Mayo Clinic.
Met her at the Mayo Clinic.
So by now, you had started having grandchildren. And that has been a huge chapter in your life.
It has. It has. The first family, Wendy's family that had children, got treated just like my children got treated from Grandma Andersen, who didn't especially, she would be helpful to me. She was trying to help me as the mother, and washing and bottling and sewing. And so I thought, that's what you're supposed to do. And I went to Wendy's, and I tried to do those same things and did some things, and then I'd go home. And then I finally started to figure out that I wasn't bonding with these children. So I thought, you know what? And by then, you all didn't need as much help. And so I then concentrated more on the little kids.
So you recognized that your strengths were to just really be one-on-one with those kids. And you've left a legacy in your grandma tapes.
I hope. And
Tell
I
us
found
about
the
that.
original stories of the grandma tapes the other day.
So you recorded these little cassette tapes of stories that were read.
That had a moral or a religious bent to it.
And how many grandchildren do you have?
You know, I think between Woody and I, it's about 55.
So about 1973 or 4, we moved to 945
South
Austin Lane
Yeah.
or something in Orem. And tell us about that time. By now you had
Given
quit.
up the business. It was good. I could just be a Relief Society counselor and follow you kids through your teen
And you had your real estate
activities.
holdings. And
Yeah, had the real estate holdings. And I had these holdings, and I said, Scott, what would you do if anything happened to me? He said, I'd call Tom and Doug and say, sell. He was not interested. He would help me a little bit, but his heart was not really in it. Money didn't mean, he wasn't going to do too much for money. Not worth it.
so you're living here in Orem, in the Orem 19th Ward. And when Dad got sick. Tell us about
Yeah.
that time.
Well, he left to make the film of his whole career, Where Jesus Walks. And it was to be made in Israel. Done so much research, had a wonderful script. Bob Stum was the major photographer. And before he left, he took Ryan down to the ditch, to the stream, and he himself had fallen on a rock. And his back hurt him, and he thought he attributed it to that fall on the rock. So all the time he was in Israel, he thought, all I need to do is get back to that chiropractor.
Plus he'd had the flu.
Yeah, he'd had the flu. But I just need to get back to that chiropractor. But then he started losing his appetite in Israel and became so sick that they sent him home on a plane, and Jack was to meet him at some juncture to change planes, but the plan didn't go. So he came home, and that first night, as he slept, he was restless all night long, just restless. But he got up for this long-awaited chiropractic visit. And when he got there, the chiropractor took one look at him and said, Scott, you better go see a doctor. And he did give him a little treatment, but it was nothing that helped. So then
He was very thin and
very thin.
How long was he in Israel?
3 months. Should have been 3 months, probably 2.5 months.
so he came home in late April, and then we got the diagnosis that he was just full of cancer. And those were bittersweet.
Yeah. Then I turned to all these alternative treatments.
I remember the doctor kindly making a house call
Yeah.
and
Said it
caught
can't
him
hurt.
having a coffee enema out in the sun. But they were very nice about
Very, very nice about it. And then one day, Dr. Briggs said, what do you think is going to happen with him? And I said, I don't think he can make it. And he said, that's right. You know, he can't. But he wasn't going to tell me that if I still held out.
Very nice. He and Dwayne Davis.
Oh,
were
and
very
Jim.
attentive.
And Jim Pinniger.
Linda's father, Jim.
Yeah.
So he died June 4th in a few days. June 4th of 76.
Yes.
So what is that, 31 years?
Yeah. So I thought, well, I'll never be happy again, but no one will ever know that I'm not unhappy. I'll play the part. And it was the worst thing that had happened to me in my life, and I truly didn't think I could ever be happy again. But I think everyone is given the a spirit that gets them through the worst of it. I was comforted. What is the Holy Ghost? It's a comforter. And I was truly comforted. I just got through the worst of it, and then in a few weeks, then the real seriousness of it set in, and I was bereft. But
And you never dreamed that you'd have such another chapter.
no, I didn't. And I think you know, I honestly think it was sort of meant to be, just the way everything worked out.
Because not 3 months earlier, Dad had spoken at
At Ruth's funeral.
Woody Evans' wife,
Yeah.
Ruth, Udall's funeral. And you had known each other for...
Yeah, years.
And I think Dad was always a little threatened by Woody's status as a dentist.
And he would kid me about that, and it was the furthest thing from my mind. We'd be getting ready to go to study group. He'd say, oh, yeah, I know. You gotta look good for Woody. Go ahead. I mean, gosh. And to me, Woody, I thought, that is the driest old stick. I mean, he has.
So I remember when he called and asked if you needed a friend.
Ah, yeah. Yeah,
And who knew?
that's right.
Almost 32 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you began that courtship, and you were married to Woody October 30th? Or
Yeah, 29.
October 29th of 1976. And, yeah. So, I don't think either of you realized the work that was involved.
In blending these families?
Just the sheer numbers of
Oh, yes.
children and grandchildren.
Yeah.
And what a remarkable job you've both
Yeah.
done.
It truly has been. I just am so grateful for the feelings that exist among the families.
Yes.
They're all interested in you. They don't see enough of you.
And we
That's
feel
our
the
only
same.
problem.
So then the grandchildren really started arriving
Yeah.
on both sides.
Yeah. And that's when we decided we had to be Grandma Beth, because there was a Grandma Ruth and a Grandma Beth. And so that's how that, instead of Evans, kind of switched, which I think is good for a first name.
Warmer.
Uh-huh.
So you've been Grandma Beth and Grandpa Woody,
Uh-huh.
and there has been no favoritism. I mean, if you're their grandma,
Yeah. This one friend said she was in a situation like mine, and she said, a friend asked her how many grandchildren she had. And she said something like 13. She said, oh, you do not. She said, if they call you grandma, you do. And that's about it. And then I have to say that Mother Clara was a wonderful example for me in how to treat stepchildren.
and you did help quite a bit with Tina
Uh-huh.
and Grant,
Mm-hmm.
and
Noel
some
was
with
home.
Kurt and Noel.
Cooking.
And you feel close to the Evans
Mm-hmm.
children. So now that has blossomed into great grandchildren.
Yeah, starting. You have a second chance, Virl, with great grandchildren. It's great. They can be just as.
I've noticed many times in your life you've thought a particular grandchild was outgrowing you,
Uh-huh.
and what were you going to do?
Uh-huh.
But the Lord has blessed you.
That's right. That's right.
But you've
Oh.
always had a child to console and amuse. And so
Well,
currently you're enjoying Laura's,
yes.
Pamela and Asplin's family.
And Jenny's.
Jenny's children.
And Rachel's. Yeah. And about the scraped apples that I do, Cammie was about 4, and she said, Grandma, how long do you think it's going to be before you die? And I was kind of searching for an answer, and she said, oh, well, that's all right, because we probably won't want scraped apples then anyway.
Now, one of the highlights of the grandchildren years was Riverside.
Oh,
Country
that was
Club.
so fun. Wasn't that
The
fun?
underground.
Yeah, the underground. Climbing up, hiking up Old George.
And you spent a lot of time and effort on Thomas,
Yes,
Bonnie and
yes.
Thomas,
Yeah.
trying to help.
Yeah. Yeah.
Are there any other memories of grandchildren that stand out? Or?
Just the importance of them in my life, you know.
They seem to be very much on your mind.
Mm-hmm. The ones that are Ian and
Yeah.
those that Thomas.
So, Mom, how did you become so unconditionally loving?
I think I had to make some changes in my thinking to get out of this hole that I was in. And I've had to find those things, and I found that in doing them, that it did bring me peace. And, you know, there's the ordinances and the principles, and I feel anyone should be able to master the ordinances, but the principles take some time. But I've found, you know, that love and forgiveness and caring and all have their own wonderful price or blessing if you're able to utilize those principles. And I found as I experimented with them that they worked. It worked. I found peace. I found the only place there is to look for peace. And that is that if there is a void in every human heart, and the only one that can fill it is the presence of Christ. And that has helped me to focus on Christ, and I think that's the only true peace we find. And I have a long way to go. I cannot believe that I'm still working now on the same ideas I started out with. I have not mastered it, but it's helped. It's taken the roughest edges off, and I'm still pursuing it. And I thank the Lord every day for the many, many blessings in my life, and for the church, the direction, and all that has given me as a teenager and throughout my life, and all the additional teachings that we have, and the leadership that we have that sets us such a wonderful example. And I think that's been the greatest blessing in my life. And I feel sorry for those who don't have it. That's why I think the missionary program is so vital, to spread that so that more people will have the blessings that we have.
So has life been good?
You know, life's been good, but it's been hard. And I guess that's all right, because I think it's the only way I would have made much progress. I truly do. I wouldn't have dug deeper, spent more time reading, experimenting. No, if I could have gotten by, I would have. So I think I think all of these hardships count for a lot in our lives. And that when something comes to us that's of a difficult nature, that we truly should say thank you. This is the way it should be, and not resist it, and find what you're to learn from that lesson. So I look around at grandchildren and others, brothers and sisters, and I see that they have problems, and I think, yeah, go ahead, have at it. This is what we're here for. So if we can do this gracefully and successfully, more power to us. And I say this in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
So, Mom, you mentioned that your mother had been a little bit heavy. I know Annie Stafford was very short and wide. And Mom, you had mentioned that your mother was a little bit heavy after having babies. That was okay. And Annie Stafford was short and wide and giggled a lot, according to Dad. So at some point, society dictated that we should be thin.
Thin. That came about the early 1900s. That you shouldn't have that second bowl of oatmeal for breakfast. You're entitled to that as long as you have a baby and a family, but then, until then.
So you have felt some pressure to...
And I'll tell you, I would have brought enough pressure on myself, but you can easily understand, Anne, that Scott was more anxious than I. That we both watch our weight. And he did his share. He did his share. And he was very conscious of that. He was the incentive for a lot of the dieting that I did. And I did almost to the extreme. And I think that had a little something to do with weakening my body when I had this kind of nervous feeling. I don't doubt I was probably not completely well nourished.
And exercise was a big part of both of your lives.
Yes. Exercise, with my back, I was free of back pain if I exercised. So there was no chance. No, I had to exercise.
So you have swum, jogged,
yoga, weight
weights,
train,
a self-taught yoga master.
Just with the tapes, VCRs.
How long have you been practicing yoga now?
Probably 10 years.
And Woody began to run. Kind of.
He would see Scott run down on the track, and yeah, he's been avid about his exercise. He says he wouldn't be here had he not started exercising, and I don't doubt but that's true.
But you love to exercise, really. The result.
I love the result. Yeah. And now I do the water aerobics. So
with Gladys and friends.
And friends. Very important, the friends part.
So friends have been an important part of your life all along.
They have.
And you. Yeah. What are some diets?
Oh, gosh. What were some
The oil that we took in a spoon before you ate.
And that probably was not a bad idea. Probably, I can't remember.
Various shots and potions.
Yeah. Well, I've always tried to help myself in whatever situation I was in. And I think maybe some of my early neglect or you want to call it, whatever, may have contributed to that. And maybe when I'm forced with a challenge, I think it's up to you. You've got to find a solution. And maybe it has stood me in good stead through other experiences of my life. I'm tough and I'm self-reliant. And I know some people won't exercise or won't, do what the doctor recommends.
They passively wait for someone to.
But I've always been easily motivated in finding something and doing it, which has been a lifesaver, truly a lifesaver. Yeah, if I didn't have the physical activity to go along with the back massages, I'd be in bad shape.
So everyone's seen your tennis balls and socks,
Yeah.
golf balls. Now we're on baseballs.
Baseballs can fluctuate, yeah.
Yeah. Nail polish bottles.
Yes, anything that might.
Non-traditional
Uh-huh.
is always best.
That's right. That's right. Make do.
All right.